Hello everyone, it's Ileana. Welcome to the new episode of Chalkarken. Today I'm solo riding, so sorry for you. But yeah, we decided with Celine that since it's really difficult to align our schedules, we can sometimes and maybe just go by ourselves or together with our guest speakers, which we are planning to have. Okay, so whatever. Well, today is Monday, and I'm planning to share this podcast tomorrow, so June 11th. And this weekend, we had the European elections. Maybe just one word before starting basically the subject of this episode, which is quite related with politics. Well, as Chakarken is actually. So yeah, it's worrying to see that far right is quite strong in some big countries such as France, Germany, Austria, in Belgium also. Not a big country, but wouldn't say a right-wing country, at least for the European Parliament. So it's really worrying to see that, because then basic human rights, women's rights, LGBTQI rights will be on stake. Hopefully not. As the progressive ones, we can just cry a little bit, well, metaphorically or actually, and then stand up again and do what we were doing before and keep working for social justice and women's rights. Speaking about women's rights, today's topic is, well, not a topic, but I can give a little bit of a background. So recently I've been seeing that, well, in Turkey, for instance, my country, and in the world basically, that some men, some privileged men, that everybody knows that they are abusers, are not actually cancelled, as everyone would say, and most people do say and are worried, but they are still valued, and this gives me so much frustration and anger. So it really annoyed me, and I was also reading a book which I think I will refer to it too many times today and in the upcoming episodes. It's The Right to Sex, and it's written by Amia Srinivasan. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but if you just type The Right to Sex, you will find the book. And it's an amazing book, actually. It's compiled by several essays, and one of the essays is The Conspiracy Against Men. This is a subject that I think everyone can relate, and even though the writer, the philosopher, mostly considers or mostly takes cases from the US, UK, and India, I think we can relate whichever country. So there is a fear, mostly in those people who are more privileged than the others in their own society or environment. So such as, let's take the US, rich white men, or in Western Europe, Western European upper middle class white men. So these people are mostly contrary to the others, and with the others I mean less privileged or underprivileged. The state, the police, the justice system is being much more kinder for them. So what we see, and especially after MeToo movement, but even before that, these men, mostly men, have the fear of being wrongly accused, committing sexual assault, crime, or rape. And this is quite interesting to think about, because when considering other kinds of crimes, let's think about whatever crime that we can actually see and we can experience, we can see day by day. That if, let's again take the US example, when a poor and black man commits the same crime with an upper middle class white man, we know that justice system is being nicer towards the white man. This is statistically true. And also, well, before even talking about how ridiculous that fear is, I want to just give some statistics, basically some data. So in her book, in the Right of Sex, the philosopher gives an example of a study from the UK Home Office. So the Home Office basically counted only a third as many false accusations as the police, which basically these were judged when the study was ongoing. basically. So what police judged was that out of 2,600 complaints, 216 of those were false. But what Home Office, the UK Home Office, found was that only a third was actually false compared to the police's judgment. So it also reveals that just 0.23% of rape reports led to a false arrest, and only 0.07% of rape reports led to a man being falsely charged with rape, and none resulted in wrongful conviction. So what we see here, and which is an actual ridiculous part, is first of all, it's the police who sometimes decide to take the case or not take the case, or to believe in women, or question them a lot of times, and which causes, basically, this is also, like, studies reveal that, which is also statistically true, that in some areas 90% of the sexual harassment cases aren't even reported. So the argument that women just go and will report a false accusation towards a man is already sort of ridiculous, because women already fear that either they will not find justice, or they will be disappointed by the state, which happens too many times, like, already, or just that police officer will question them inappropriately, asking how they were dressed, or were they out at a late time, or if they had relationship with this person, but like sort of questioning if this was actually rape or not. And like, as so many men think, this is not something given. It's not that whatever women say is believed, or basically saying that the justice system doesn't work like that. I think everyone knows that. You cannot just depend on someone's word and convict someone. Well, depending on the country, if there is a political reason, you can do whatever you want, actually, but it doesn't work like that for women. And then, actually, that's quite interesting, and that made me think, and that's why I wanted to also record this. The philosopher also questions the intersectionality of the issue. For instance, she mentions that in the US, Black men make up only 14% of the US male population, and 70% of men convicted of rape, which is quite an interesting statistic. Also says that a Black man serving time for sexual assault is 3.5 times more likely to be innocent than a white man convicted of sexual assault. And also mentions that person probably, these people probably are, by statistics, are poorer. So then it makes you question, whose fear is that exactly? Because the justice system is already not fair for everyone, depending on your race, depending on your nationality, depending on your color, depending on your religion, or whatsoever. So the justice system is not fair already. Then, and that's where the author mentions that this fear basically belongs to the privileged one. Because now, after this, after the MeToo movement, while it's still not perfect, the society tends to believe more in what women say, because mostly it happens to be true. So this statistics were actually quite interesting for me, because without knowing this, it's sometimes hard to argue on this topic, because you tend to do empathy with the person having this fear of being wrongfully accused, while the statistics show that it's very unlikely. But what also creates here is, maybe take that fear and take it back with you and think about it. So why do I have this fear? Do I believe that I'm doing or acting towards women that could fall under sexual harassment? Or as a man sharing the society with women in your everyday life, have you not learned what is uncomfortable, what is stepping the line when communicating or engaging with women? So while that fear comes, as the author says, from a very privileged perspective, which is again very selfish, because the idea is not to talk about the justice system and how corrupt it is, but it's only about protecting themselves. Well, there is also another issue that is quite disturbing. There are so many cases, and I think it's still possible to hear for instance, to see on social media when women talk about their experience, or just reading some studies, that there are a lot of women that are victims of sexual harassment and sexual assault who went to the police to seek for justice and were not believed at all. And the reason for them to not be believed is basically up to the police. And let's think about the police system. Maybe today it's going towards a better place in terms of diversity and perspective, but not far ago, like maybe 20 years ago or so, police was quite a patriarchal structure. It is still a patriarchal structure. But I think now in some countries there are some sort of trainings and such to educate officers towards this kind of issues. But I'm very sure that still, when a woman goes to police to report sexual assault, they're being judged, they're being questioned too much, in a sense that the way they dress, the way they act, it's just not enough for a policeman to believe them. So they might be a bit slutty, or they might be too old, or they might be too ugly or disabled. That brings another question. It's not that us women are facing every single day a discrimination or like a body shaming from each other or from the opposite sex, doesn't matter. It is also a fact that since somehow it is believed that, for instance, an old person cannot be raped, or a disabled person, who would want to rape a disabled person, or who would want to rape a person from whichever race? That is absolutely ridiculous. There's like no word to explain it. But that's also a case when the officer might think that they cannot report on this because it's false. Because how can someone rape a disabled person or an old person? Which has nothing to do with how the concept of rape works. The victims are mostly chosen from vulnerable people. So that's why, like, given everything that I've already said, well, it's also, so yeah, I already said like whatever race, but it's a fact that, as the author mentions, and as I said, she takes the US, UK, and India as examples. In the US, it was, but I'm sure that it still is actually. A Black woman is more sexualized, perceived as more available. And on the opposite side, Black men are also quite sexualized. And of course, it's a Black man who rapes a white woman. Vice versa is not common as they think, or not very possible. Which brings us to some ugly historical facts that in 1800s, by 1900s, there are some cases where even when there was a white woman and Black man relationship, a consent-based relationship, an emotional relationship, society tend to understand it as harassment and rape and decide on what to do with that man. So not even bringing this up to the court, which there is nothing to bring. Or even when sometimes there were white women claiming that the XYZ person, which happens to be Black, were harassing them or sexually assaulting them, but in fact it wasn't, but it was just an overreaction. While I'm using my words very carefully, but these are historically known cases, the society were lynching them, and there were cases where these people were executed, but it wasn't a court decision because there was never a sort of justice on this. Not the justice system, not the state deciding on it, but the society having these biases in their mind, deciding on what will happen to these people. So that's why I also think that this MeToo era was quite important and is still quite important. And I believe that in many, many countries, it should start. Like, to give an example, in Turkey, I wish there was a spark where we could see all the ugly celebrities or whatever people that are still valued and behind the curtains are known to be harassers or abusers, to be public and shamed. So I don't have high hopes about canceling them, because contrary to what everyone thinks, actually no one who are supposed to be canceled are actually canceled. I don't really know, and correct me if I'm wrong, like feel free to share a single case where the abuser, the male character that is quite famous in here or there, whatever, actually being cancelled. I mean, the Me Too movement was quite a success, and it was a success because it was a teamwork to publish this and to follow up on this and to make big deal of it so that the abuser can be convicted. Otherwise, that could have been just nothing. That's the usual case, basically, that there is an abuser, a man in power, who needs to be treated actually like a child who likes to have fun and basically destroying so many women's life and covering up their nasty behavior, or just saying that they're too sexual, or they just like to do it, or they have done some little mistake. But the media, for once, and the society was on the right side to shed a light on this, to actually make a change. And that's why the author is claiming, I fully support and agree. I've been doing some research on this and that, and it is indeed a fear of a privileged man. So it is also very interesting when hearing or reading about the claims of these abusers. They always say that they didn't know. They didn't know that their act was in fact an abuse or a harassment or sexual assault. In one case, it is unfortunately true that we live in a men's world, but we live in that world. So it is quite easy for those men actually to see, as I said before, to understand when communicating or engaging a woman. What is a sexual assault? What makes other women uncomfortable? So it's not too difficult to guess that touching a woman's ass or breast is harassment, and this is not just a childish game. So I don't agree when this claim is too much on the front. It's really basic. If you have been living in this society, so for sure you know how this society works, what is comfortable, what is uncomfortable, what is appropriate and what is not. So I don't think, well, maybe in some very specific cases, but I don't think in most cases this argument should even be something to consider, because it's also your responsibility to be aware of what's going around the society, how things work, how other people react to your action, and so on. I'm full of feminist rage in here, so that's why I'm for the first time talking very slowly, thinking everything ahead, which is a surprise, and Selim would be proud of me, so she wouldn't have to cut some of what I said actually. But yeah, so maybe also giving some facts, going back to the study of the British police from the 2600 of cases, assuming that 216 were false. So this basically amounts of 8%. But then, when restudying this, the UK Home Office, these false allegations basically dropped to 2%. And on the academia, falsely reported cases tend to be between 2 to 8% in general, which is quite low. But it also really depends on the study, because it's really difficult to understand if the case was false or not, how the police questioned the victims and the abusers, or so-called abusers. So it's really not easy to give a certain percentage of this. But as mentioned before, given that not every woman or not every victim goes to the police and report about what happened to them, if we take this into consideration, the percentage of the false reports drops even more. So it's already 2 to 8%, which is quite low. And again, these are just accusations. Then the judge will be the one deciding on what happens. And there, a spoiler, the percentage of the abuser being charged to prison or whatever is so low. So it is so easy to get away with this. I mean, even counting that, the number goes already between 0 to 1. So I don't even think that it's fair to say, when discussing this publicly, that the percentage of false reports are between 2% to 8%. I mean, it is obviously something to share, because it's the study shows that, but it is a must to add on the following: that first thing, not every woman or not every victim reports on this assault, or two, not every abuser or rapist or whatever is charged or that pays with their life. So the consequence is so little that when considering what the victim is going through, it's basically nothing. But then I start thinking it is so hypocritical that the selfishness of this kind of men, it's just unbelievable. You would expect that the MeToo movement would make something clear in their minds, or even then taking the side of the right and not being on the side of this privileged white men, abusers, rapists, etc. That is actually quite scary regarding the path we're walking together. That's why the more power the right wing gets, the more of these voices will be heard. So it is in fact really relevant, and not only on institutional terms, but at individual level. Like the social media is already going crazy on these issues. There are already studies on how women and men separately are radicalized or moved towards right or left in the last 20 years. That should mean something for us. The subjects that are being brought up in social media or Reddit or whatever platform. In one side, yes, social media brings the worst of people, and it's a free platform where you are behind a computer or behind a device where you share your idea, but it shouldn't be disregarded. It should be taken seriously, definitely. And that's what we should do, in fact, or reflect a bit on this. So why is it so loud, the voice of people who think that they will be for sure blamed of committing a sexual assault and that their life will be destroyed? Or how does those people make so much empathy with the incredibly privileged rich white men when they are supposedly cancelled? What is the common characteristics you have? You're not even near that rich privileged person, but you have more empathy for them, while there is so little towards the women you see and live together every single day. That's why, again, repeating the same words and agreeing again, but the author is super right in questioning the intersectionality aspect of this issue. If we don't focus on social justice, on racial issues, on economic inequalities when we are discussing about feminism, then it doesn't give the same result, and it's not exactly true. It goes hand in hand. It's not only a fight between white men and white women. It has too many fronts and it has too many aspects that these very delicate issues are in need to be considered in so many different aspects. So this was basically sort of my own brainstorming, which I think could be valuable to someone who never thought about this, or to someone who already was thinking about it and didn't know exactly what to think and wanted to hear another perspective. I aim to do more in-depth research on this and maybe talk to some people, and maybe even if there is the right person to record together a podcast on this specific issue, because it is unacceptable for me to hear these many voices believing in something that is statistically so low, and without doing any research or something, just believing in what the privileged one says, the rich and powerful one says. So I hope you sort of enjoyed this episode as much as you can, because it's not a fun topic. And I really would love to hear what you think. Either you completely disagree or fully agree, or even just want to ask for the link of this study. Please feel free to reach out, and please follow us so we will feel the need to do more podcasts. While we really want, but these issues are so important. So please also encourage us to do more and to work more on these issues.